Hello and welcome to the first video in a series of tutorials on how to design the exterior of a car. This series is inspired by a post from 20 years ago on Miata.net. Somebody wanted to do a roughly 3-inch stretch wheelbase on a Miata. Well, stock wheelbase on a Miata is roughly 90 inches or 2,266 millimeters. So we're going to go with 2,370 millimeters or roughly like 93.3 inches. We're going to retain the stock track width, front and rear. However, we are, of course, going to account for wider offset wheels as well as wider tire options that exist now that didn't exist 20 years ago. And I think this guy may have done like a V8 swap, or somebody was talking about it in this thread. I don't know. I read it a long time ago and just looked it up for the sake of this video. So let's get rid of that. And then this video assumes that you have some knowledge of plasticity, that you have the studio license, because we're going to rely very heavily on the square tool. This is automotive surfacing is pretty advanced modeling. However, we're going to go step by step. So if you're a beginner, which this video is kind of geared more towards beginners, you can follow along and be successful with your own design. I should also mention I have chosen that 2,370 millimeter wheelbase for my own vehicle. However, you can do a 6-inch stretch. You can do a 5.5. You could do whatever you want. You can also base it on a different car entirely. If you have an NC Miata that maybe would make a good donor, you can look up the dimensions of the NC. Excuse me, the NC wheelbase and track width, or a BRZ, or whatever it is that you want to use. In this case, we're doing a stretched wheelbase Miata, or sorry, in mine. But so substitute whatever dimensions you want. Okay, let's get started. So I like to do an initial setup, bounding box. I didn't like to use like a rule of thirds. So what I mean by that is I'm going to set up a rectangle using the corner rectangle tool, snapping to the origin. And essentially, the total height is actually going to be 1/2 of the length of the wheelbase. So in that case, that's 1185. And then the total length is going to be 3 times that height, or 1.5 times the wheelbase. So in that case, again, it's 3,555. Okay, and then this isn't exactly the total length. I'm going to add a little extra. So if we grab this rectangle and we hit Alt-J, which is unjoin, essentially, we can then take the first line here, Shift-D for duplicate, Y to move it along the Y-axis, and then 1185, enter, copy it again, Y, 1185, whoops, enter. Okay, and then we actually want to, well, I could do this a couple different ways. More than one way to skin a cat, as they say. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of those lines. We're actually going to copy this one more time. We're going to go Shift-D, Y, 1185 divided by 6, enter. So take whatever dimension it is you want. Say you're doing a BRZ, that's like a 27 something inch or millimeter wheelbase, 2,700 and something millimeters. So substitute that, do the math, and then it's nice because we're going by a ratio, right? You take that number and then you can divide it by 12 divided by 6. So again, in this case, I'm going to go G, Y, 1,185 divided by 12. And then I'm actually just going to copy this one again, Shift-D. And rather than, I could, again, go Y negative whatever, or you can also grab it G and then F and then snap it just back to the origin. And now we can create a line that goes all the way from the very first to the last there. And then Shift-D, Z, 1,185 divided by 3. Same thing again, Z, 1,185 divided by 3. And last one, Z. Okay, this is a nice construction grid that I like to use in order to create a side profile. Okay, so let's group those. We'll go with Control G, group. We'll just call that side grid, or you could call it whatever you want. All right, now the next thing, this is going to be based on 245, yeah, 245/40 R15 wheel. So the diameter of that comes out to 577 millimeters, if I'm remembering correctly off the top of my head. So we'll do 577. That's the total diameter, but we actually just want the radius here, divided by 2 to give us the radius. And then uh, let's snap that. Okay, and then G, Y, 1185 divided by 2 puts it right in the middle of this third, or this section here. Okay, so Shift C, circle, and there we go. Now we have a wheel, and then we can use that wheel as sort of a basis for the wheel flat we want to make. So there's mid curve, or sorry, mid. Let's move that up. G, Z, 1185 again, divided by, let's go 24. Okay. And you can do this however you want. So then let's hit offset, F, and yeah, this looks like it'll be good. So the inside of the wheel flat will be here, and then the outside will be there. So let's strike a couple of lines accordingly. So we've got 1, 2, and you'll see in a second what we're doing with these lines here. We can even get rid of one of them. So we just have that second one. So this one will offset F to, do we want to go in that far? How far is that? No, let's go out here. Let's make a really thin wheel flat. How about that? Okay. Oh, I forgot to do one thing. Let's also copy this, Z, and then I'm going to just keep using that same number and essentially make everything related to that height number that I'm using. And you can do the same thing if you happen to have a different height. All right, so that's what I've done. And now I want this wheel flat. It can't tuck in too far, right? It's got to kind of come out at the sides. And I like to go with, say, like a 12-degree option. So let's go 102, right? Because 90 plus 12 is 102. If I had gone the other way, then it would be, I would just be doing 12 anyway. So 102, same thing on both sides. G, F, I'm going to snap it to be tangent right there. Same thing with this one, G, F. Let's make it tangent. There it goes. Okay. Now we'll do a little trim up there, trim, and then I'm actually going to trim down here and trim this. It's quite a bit of trimming, probably more than we needed. Okay. Now I have blend curve hotkeyed to Shift B. You can hotkey it to whatever you want, but I would just suggest hotkeying it because if I remember correctly, it's not by default, and it's a very useful tool. You'll probably use it quite a bit, even though it's already there in your sort of main tray, but hotkeys are so much quicker. Okay, so we're going to go from this quarter curve region, snapped there, and you'll see that it's got trim turned on. If this trims, then you won't have that same snap on this side, so you want to turn trim off. Okay, and then Shift B, for me anyway, or whatever it is for you. And then now is fine to trim because we're going to trim away all this excess that we don't need. Cool, that's done. Now, we're going to grab all these curves, J for join. I have rebuild curve, or just rebuild, I guess, because rebuild curves and surfaces, etc. Hotkey to Shift R. So I'm going to Shift R, rebuild. We're going to go number of points. The default of 10 is actually perfect. And you can play around. If you start reducing the number of points here, you're even with 10, as you can see, there's more roundness here as opposed to when it was transitioning more to that straight line. So let's say we went down to 8. It is sort of going to change the shape of your wheel arch. Um, I think 10 is good. It's what I want. I'm going to stick with that. And then let's grab this curve now that it's all blended into one. O for offset, F, and we'll just snap it right there. Now we can always, if we're not so sure about what we just did, we can always just take a quick look or quick measurement. So the inside of the wheel flat, the inside of this arch here, let's see, 48 millimeters. So that's a couple inches. And then what is the thickness of this wheel flat itself? Is 16, so it's like just over half inch. I think that's good. I think we can do whatever we want. We can always go back and change things. Remember, this is a digital canvas. It's not like we're spending a ton of money on expensive modeling clay. Okay, so trimmed off that. All right, so the next thing we want to do here is we'll strike a line from the top of this arch to the bottom. And now, actually, let's leave that alone for just a second. I think it'd probably be a better visual to set up the wheels first. So I happen to know that a stock stock front track width of a Miata is 1410 millimeters. So obviously, let's go snap to one. Or sorry, I shouldn't say snap to one. I should say we'll switch to our front view. So let's go Shift D so that we can retain that circle on the grid as well as copy it out into 3D space. So let's go X, and then half of 1410 is 705. And obviously, if you don't feel like doing math, you can always just go 1410 divided by 2. Helps if you have type all of the numbers. 1410 divided by 2. There you go. Okay. And now, oh, sorry, it's I like perspective. There we go. So tap 5 on your number pad. Okay, 3. So I can grab the face, and I'm going to extrude it out. Negative 245 over 2, right? Because it's going half one way and then half the other way. So 245 divided by 2, back that way. And there we go. Now we've got a 245 section tire in the correct space. Now, obviously, things are approximate. Some tires are narrower, wider. The diameter could be different. But this, using a tire size calculator, this is what you're going to get. Another thing we can do, oh, sorry, and then that's assuming stock wheel offset. However, if you put a 245 on a 9-inch wheel, you're going to need to push that tire out 10 millimeters. If it's on a 9.5 with an offset of 29 millimeters, then you got to go for 16 and so on. This used to be like the widest available option for NA Miatas. I know Goodwin Racing recently started selling the 9.5-inch wide wheels for Koenig. I forget if it's the Hypergrams or the Ultragrams or something like that, or the Decagram. I don't know. It's one of those in a 9.5-inch width. And then the 10s and 11s are available now. And it used to only be those Hoosier A7 and R7s in a 275 or even a 295 if you wanted. I know now there's the Nankang CRS is available as a 200 treadwear tire in a 275. So if you wanted to do like, I mean, use these modifiers if that's what you want to do. I think, you know what, let's account for that. If we wanted to do a 15 by 10 for track days, and let's go 9, so let's go 16 on this 245 and see what that gets us. So, oh, what did I say for the 16 that we have to do? I mean, sorry. Yes, I said it backwards. It's a 9.5. So 16, we're moving it out 16 millimeters. So G, oops, let's go 1. G, X, and then 16. All right, so that's where it would sit if it was on a 9.5-inch rim. And then here we can even go Shift D. So we're copying that now. Let's hide the, or let's actually rename the original. So we'll go 15.9, actually, let's go 245 on 15 by 9.5. That's what that is. And now this one, let's hide it. Now let's select the faces. So if it's a 275, essentially if we just add 15 to each face, then we go from 45 to 75, right? So 15. There we go. So that's a 275. And then what was the difference if we went from a 275 on a 15 by 10? So that's only a 4 millimeter difference. So let's push that out by 4 mil. G. Oh, helps if you select it, right? Okay, there we go. G, X, 4. All right. So that's where a 245 or sorry, 275 would sit. Now, obviously, 275 35 R15 is going to be actually slightly smaller in terms of diameter, but let's just leave it. It's better to make the sort of objects that you have to work around slightly larger to make sure you have clearance. So let's go for that. 275 on a 15 by 10. Cool. Now, the rear track happens to just be 10 millimeters wider than the front. So literally we can take both of these, select them both. We can go Shift D to copy. Y, our wheelbase is 2370 or whatever yours is if you're, I don't know, working off a BRZ or something. And then X, 10, and that's it. Okay. We've got a front tire set and a rear tire set. Your let's say your street tires and your track tires, right? Okay, so let's start with the wider ones because we want to make sure that our fender's clear, right? Okay, so coming back to this line, let's grab that one. And I'll just use a ratio again. So I don't know if you remember, I mentioned the total length was at 3,555. So I'm going to hit G, X, 3,555 divided by 4. So now the width of the vehicle, the total vehicle width is half the length. Obviously, I know I added on a little extra, but I like to use that sort of basis. Okay, and that's good. We see that this line is outside of the where the outside of the tire edges, the outside edge of the tires. All right, so let's grab this bottom point, G, X. Let's move it in, probably just a little bit. And again, you'll see I'm typing and I'm just making everything a ratio, sort of a function of that basic dimension. All right, so divided by 48, see what that gives us. And you'll also notice I'm kind of going by like multiples of, I don't know, 3 or 12 or whatever. So I'll do like 12, 24, 48, 96, and so on. So that's kind of a nice tuck. I think, yeah, let's go 48, and then we'll tuck it again after we project our curves. You see what I mean by in a second. Okay, so this, now let's go Shift S, G to move that control point, and then X, and so we did 1185 divided by, what, 48 was what we did. Now obviously that's going to flare it out. If you go 96, if you go half, now the curve will approach essentially straight up and down. And we're going to go somewhere in between. We'll actually go, again, using sort of ratio here. So 48 was what we did, and if we just go 48, say, divided by 4, it's kind of a nice minimal curvature to this line. Now, when we project these curves, since this point is at the exact same height as the top of this curve, it'll essentially split that curve into two curves where this point is. So what we want to do is grab this curve and then extend it. I have that hotkey to Shift E. If I remember off the top of my head, that is not automatically hotkeyed. And then you can put anything you want here. You can go 5 millimeters, half a millimeter, 500 millimeters. Let's just go 50. How about that? All right. So now we'll grab this curve and this curve, project. I've got that hotkey to I. I think that's a default hotkey. Somebody can correct me. Sorry, I've set my stuff up such a long time ago that I don't exactly remember what was default and what was something that I hotkeyed because I was using it. Let's keep this line for now. I'm not going to delete it. I'm not going to hide it yet. But these curves both need to be rebuilt. So let's rebuild them. Number points. Let's stick with this 10. Or actually, no, explicit control. Let's go with 9. And then, okay. And now, if we grab both of these and we use the square tool, you'll see that there's deviation. Let's amplify that deviation. Problematic. Well, that's because we're trying to do a 5 by 5 square onto essentially what should be a 9 by 2. So let's go for that. 9 by 2. Because we don't need all those points in the middle. And sure enough, we see 0 deviation because it's able to match those points exactly. Yeah, I guess since I said this is kind of more for beginners, oops, I accidentally got rid of it. Let's do it all over again. You don't want to increase spans if you can avoid it. Also, we typically only do like a 3 by 3, a 3 by 5, a 5 by 5 square. Once in a while, we'll cheat and do like a 7 degree square, but for the most part, we're going to stick with like 3 by 3s for most of our primary surfaces. This is kind of the exception. Wheel flats, just because there's so much curvature here to match, we get a 9 by 2. It's a bit of the outlier. Okay, now we want to take this exact same wheel flat, and we'll just copy it to the rear. So Shift D, and then Y 2370, and then we'll actually just move it out. So G, X, and divided by, I think 96 gives us what, 12.34, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so what did we say? That it's 10 millimeters wider in the rear. So that's perfect. We get 12 rather than 10, but we keep, I don't know, for my OCD, we keep that ratio going. Okay. That's it. That's actually our initial setup. We've got a wheel. We've got wheel flats. We can copy this profile. Let's go Shift D, Y 2370. All right, and then we'll stop here and we'll pick it up in the next one, and we'll start kind of drawing our basic side profile. All right, thanks for watching.